The Ahmaud Arbery case has, of course, stirred outrage across the country, but in Georgia, it is really hitting people and affecting people so much. So much so that in Atlanta, now keep in mind, Atlanta is a few hours away from the town where Ahmaud was gunned down, but they are, very moved by this. In fact, the city has declared May 8th, that was last Friday, which would have been Ahmaud's 26th birthday. From now on, that will be Ahmaud Arbery Day in Atlanta. So the citizens of Atlanta are clearly very moved by this because, as their mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, has said, this was the lynching of an African-American man. And Atlanta is a very large, outspoken and powerful Black community. And they are, understandably shaken by this. So joining us right now to talk about what went wrong, and I also want to talk to Mayor Bottoms about the fact that she is laying some of the blame for this on President Trump. So joining us is, once again, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Mayor, welcome back to TMZ Live.
Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
So, one of the things that really struck me here is just, as Charles had said, how unified Georgia is in this outrage, that you're not necessarily close to that town, but you feel it every bit as much.
We do, and I think it's what's being felt across the country. I think what makes this different for so many of us is the ability to have seen it happen. And for as moved as we've been by any number of killings across this country, we saw this happening in real time. And I think that was sobering for so many of us. And again, this reminder that we still have so much work to do. I can tell you, I personally did not want to watch the video. And I said very honestly and selfishly, I didn't want to watch it because even now, as I'm speaking with you about it, there is this tightness I get in my chest and this churning in my stomach when I think of young African American men having their lives taken in this way. And it is, I'm sure part of my response is as a mother, but certainly as mayor of a city, and just the responsibility that we all have to make sure that people are treated with dignity, and just a recognition that everyone's life matters.
Mayor, one of the things that occurred to me, I mean, look, I think that the central thing to this case is going to be this citizen's arrest law. The fact that there's a law that allows anyone, but particularly in this case where you have, Ahmaud is jogging down the street and is greeted by two white men and two men, and one of them armed with the shotgun. Obviously, he would be terrified. And I think that's part of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, that this could happen in your city.
It probably has.
I can't tell you how many times that I've gone into an empty house under construction. I'm a house stalker. Even given what they claim happened, even had he gone into that house, that's something that so many of us do regularly. And there's so many opportunities for us to fix what's broken with our laws in Georgia. One is this notion of a citizen's arrest. What we encourage our residents, if you see a crime in progress, you call 911 and then you get out of the way. Because one, we don't want you to be harmed. And two, we don't want you to take it upon yourself to act like you are law enforcement.
Mayor, I know you have been critical, as have many, of the language and the incendiary language of the president. Do you think that language set the table here?
I think that when you have a president who speaks in xenophobic terms, I think a byproduct of that is racism. And again, I'm not blaming President Trump for his murder, but I do think there is a tone that can be set from the top. In the same way that you can bring people together, you can equally divide them, and you can incite people to do things that they shouldn't do. And I think it's the reason that the president needs to be mindful of his language, that quite often his language is divisive. And it makes it seem as if we are divided into groups that should be pitted against one another. And that's not what a president should do. And hopefully, this killing will not be in vain, and we will continue to highlight these issues that we have in race as a country and the need to have these forthright discussions with one another on how we view and treat each other.
Speaking of that unity that, as you say, we do need, I'm curious what the response has been in Georgia. I know obviously the African American community is outraged by this, but it's not just about, this is about just a human being being hunted down. And I'm just curious how Georgians, regardless of race, have been responding, especially in your city, to this tragedy.
Well, I know I've spoken with our attorney general who is elected statewide. He's extremely concerned about this murder, and it's the reason that he's appointed a special prosecutor. And there are layers to his concerns that he's spoken about publicly in the way that it was handled locally and notifications that his office should have received. But I think across the board, everyone is shaken by this. And even in my own household, looking at the range of emotions that I'm seeing from my kids range in age from 18 to 9, and it's a cross section between anger and fear. And it has all of us rethinking the talk that we often have to have
Yeah.
with our African American boys. And I've said this, I've talked to my son, especially my oldest son, about many scenarios, but never once have I contemplated a scenario where he's jogging down the street in the middle of the day and how he should respond. But I think it again highlights the vulnerability, especially of African American boys and men in this country. And there's still so much work to be done. I know at the transition of the Obama administration, there was a very big push on My Brother's Keeper and where we are in shoring up our African American boys and men. And I hope that with this November's election, there's an opportunity to continue that type of work. That's the type of leadership that we need coming from the White House. And that's the type of leadership that we're missing right now.
Mayor, we are about out of time. I'm just curious on a personal level. You kind of touched on it, but given what this horrendous incident, like you said, something you never would have imagined, are you afraid for your son?
I am always afraid for my sons. And I really grapple with this as a mother because in my family, the worst has happened. My 18-year-old nephew was murdered in a case of mistaken identity. Now, that was a different set of circumstances. And the young men that were convicted of killing him were African American young men. But it very personally for my family has highlighted that the worst can happen. And as African American young men, there's often a target literally on their heads. Sometimes it's from other African American young men who are struggling with their own issues, and sometimes it's in other forms and faces. But it always concerns me. It's always top of mind.
Yeah, you
Mayor,
were right about the talk needing
yeah.
to change, because the talk is usually about how you deal with law enforcement, but now where you have citizens, armed citizens, thinking they're police, it is frightening.
So there is a new mystery in the horrible, horrible shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. The McMichaels, the two men who are now charged with his murder, as they sit in jail, there is new information about a letter that was left at the shooting scene.
Yeah, this mystery note that was left, that the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, immediately investigated. Now, you may have heard the GBI came out and said they have identified the person who wrote that note. It certainly insinuates there is a witness to the crime. It says, Ahmaud, I am so sorry. I should have stopped them. I am so sorry.
So you kind of feel like it's some kind of a bystander who could have intervened and didn't. At least that's the insinuation that a lot of people had.
Right, and the GBI said that that they had identified the person and that they don't have anything to do with the case, that they were just expressing their condolences. Ahmaud Arbery's family's attorneys say not so fast, because they have some information that they have now shared with police, information about that note, and that information could possibly connect the author of the note to the McMichaels. At least that is the information that they have gotten so far.
Well, what they had an anonymous tipster reach out and say, hey, you may want to look into this note because I recognize that handwriting, and if it's the person I believe it is, they have a direct connection to Michaels or to the man who was filming the actual video of his death. So they have, like you said, Charles, they've taken it to the GBI. We actually reached out to the GBI after they had taken this new evidence to the GBI, who said, you know, we stand by our statement from earlier in the day. We believe that we found this person and they have nothing to do with it. But like you said, Ahmaud's attorneys aren't ready to throw in the towel on this note quite yet.
Well, and Brad, it's one thing for the GBI to say that they stand by their information, but you would hope that they're at least going to look into, contact the person who sent this tip.
It sounded to me, though, like they did contact that person. It sounds like...
No, Harvey, they contacted the person. Look, we could be talking about the same person. The person the GBI spoke to could be the same person who sent the tip to Lee Merritt and Ahmaud Arbery's family attorneys.
How did GBI figure out who they say wrote the note?
Well, they haven't said that. And in fact, Lee Merritt told us that GBI has not informed them who the person is. So look, Lee Merritt's tip could be the same person that GBI spoke to, or it could be a different person. You would just hope that police will leave no stone unturned here. And although, like you said, Brad, I'm sure they stand by the information they've released, but there could be more information that could, and possibly the person who contacted Lee Merritt might have some more information that would be valuable.
But yet GBI is doubling down and saying they're convinced still, right? That's interesting because, they've got an issue right now because people are so suspicious of law enforcement in terms of investigating this case that I think law enforcement has to go the extra mile in a situation like this, just because of these 2.5 months that were just appalling.
Right.
My name is Tyra. I'm from Tampa, Florida. So regardless if new witnesses come forward or new evidence is acquired, the fact still remain that this Black man was gunned down by 2 white men who took matters into their own hands instead of calling the authorities if they felt like a crime was being committed. If they are not convicted, this further proves that America in general does not value the lives of Black people.
Well, I think what you just said is kind of a bellwether that a lot of people feel. And that's why I think the upcoming trial of this is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, you know what, Harvey, what she said, I think what she said is so true, because there are so many other facets of this case now that people are starting to look at that I think go off from the main point, which is you have video that shows them armed men going after a citizen. And that's, to me, the main focus here. Ahmaud may have been in the house 3-4 times before, but that's not the issue here. Even if he was trespassing, that's not the issue to me. The issue is that you have armed citizens hunting down someone.
Well, and I'm not so sure, because a trespass generally is a misdemeanor. He didn't take anything.
Right.
So I don't believe, even under that law, that you're allowed to use deadly force in a misdemeanor situation like this.
I just hope that once the trial starts, that we can keep our eye on the prize here and talk about what really happened and not get it, muddled up with all these other things about all these other issues that really don't have to do anything to do with his murder.
Yeah,
anyway.
Look, I'm just going to say one other thing, and I'm praying that this happens, that people don't just automatically take it to the conviction level yet. And I say it for this reason, because if the defense presents evidence that the jury didn't hear, it becomes bigger if you have this kind of backdrop where everybody says it's a preordained conclusion. And then the defense becomes bigger. I know this because I covered every day of the Rodney King.
Yeah.
And we made that mistake. The media did, and I was part of that, by showing 11 seconds of a video, a 91-second video, and then the defense showed the other 80 seconds, and it was more compelling than had we shown the full 91. And I'm not saying the video they're not showing all of the video, because in this case they are.
But this is the video we have at this point, and if there's more video, you're right. Like you hope that that comes forward and that we can get the full picture. But
Right.
the biggest development yet in the Ahmaud Arbery case, a text message that explains why, perhaps explains why Gregory McMichael and his son were out there trying to, well, not trying to, they did chase down Ahmaud Arbery because they believed that he was connected to some break-ins in the neighborhood. So Larry English, who was the owner of the home that was under construction that Ahmaud was walking through, Larry English called the police and said, "Hey, I'm concerned about my property there." And the police sent this text message: "Your neighbor is Greg McMichael. Greg is retired law enforcement and also a retired investigator from the DA's office. He said, please call him day or night when you get action on your camera," and then gave his number. So they're telling a resident there that Greg McMichael is your man for law enforcement.
Well, they're telling him a bunch of things. They're telling essentially, and this is, I don't think the media is really looking at this in the ominous way that Charles and I talked about over the weekend, that in a way, this police department deputized a vigilante because
they created a vigilante by deputizing someone who is not law enforcement. And I mean, for them to be telling Larry English, the owner of that home, that Greg McMichael is the person you have to call, that's saying that you're treating him as law enforcement, and he's not.
But here's what's screwed up about this, with the police saying that he will handle this instead of us, and basically putting him, a retired officer, in that position. What I think, that I can already hear it. What his lawyer is going to say is, well, look, he didn't make a citizen's arrest. He was making a law enforcement arrest because the police department deputized him.
The one thing I will say, Harvey, the loophole here is we don't know yet what conversation happened between Glynn County Police and Greg McMichael. This is what the police are telling Larry English, to contact Greg McMichael.
Oh, right. No, but Charles,
we don't know that the police really did deputize Greg McMichael, but essentially for the homeowner, that's what they're doing.
Well, no, they did not deputize him in the sense of saying it.
Right.
The effect is deputizing him. And when you read that text message carefully, McMichael is the one who asked the police to let him do this, and they said okay. So
what you essentially have, Harvey, is Greg McMichael is stepping up to be the vigilante for the neighborhood, and he tells the police that he wants to do this, and the police apparently approve it.
Not only approve it, they abdicate what they would do and give it to him. So, it's screwed up, but, I just hear the lawyer for McMichael saying, he wasn't acting as a citizen here. This is just insane. But
now, Harvey, as
Charles and I have been talking about this all weekend.
We discussed, I think that might help Greg McMichael, but let's remember here that the person who actually fired the shots that killed Ahmaud is Travis, and he's not former law enforcement, and he's not, by text message or anything else that we've seen yet, a de facto deputy for the department. So, but that is shocking that they would, like you say, abdicate their responsibility to a citizen. This video is really gripping video of Ahmaud Arbery from 2017, a run-in with police in Glynn County, Georgia, which is where he lives, and
it says a lot. It does say a lot to talk about.
It does say a lot. We're going to get into what it says, but the situation was Ahmaud was parked in his car in a park in Brunswick, Georgia, and the police decided that they needed to check him out for some reason. Again, we'll get into that. But once they got him out of the car, they wanted some ID, and he provided the ID, and then they wanted to search his car.
So we're gonna play this for you. The one thing we want you to really notice: they try tasing him. Look at where his hands are when they try tasing him. So we're gonna get into this, but here's the video.
Why am I with you? Yo, you want to know why I'm with you? Why? Keep your hand in your pocket. I ain't got on me. What me for? I'll tell you why I'm here, man. Why? I'll tell you why I'm here. because this area is known for drug activity.
Drug? How the I'm drug? I take when I work at Blue Beacon.
Back up.
Check my
Back
right?
up.
Talking about.
You
Check
want back?
Go ahead, bro. You can't go in my car.
You're not allowing me to search your car?
You can't go in my.
I'm not asking you. Just don't reach the car, man.
Get your hand out of your pocket.
Hands out of your pocket.
Hand out of your pocket. Down. Warning, down.
Stay on the ground. Just stay on the ground, okay?
Keep your hands out. No, keep your hands out.
I've already checked them for weapons.
Okay,
So that sound
Charles,
you were hearing, that clicking sound was the taser firing. The officer was attempting to fire. It malfunctioned. Otherwise, he would have been tased.
He had his hands up
At his
in
side.
the air when
At
they
his side.
started tasing, and then he kept doing it. Now watch his hands. He said, "Okay, put your hands up." He puts his hands up, and now the guy starts firing, and he keeps firing. And get on the ground. Why is he doing this?
Yeah, now you heard, and you even heard the other officer say, hey, I've already checked him for weapons. And that happened earlier in the stop. He had actually frisked him, patted him down, found he had nothing on him. So, you know, why he was so furiously firing the taser there, thank God it didn't work.
He obviously didn't even think to, like, kind of consult with his partner to see what steps had already been taken, because had that have been an active taser, or God forbid that not have even been a taser and been, you know, the guns that the police do carry down there, this would have been, you know, an incident of possibly Ahmaud's life being taken earlier than what it was taken, all because for no reason, because he'd already been searched. There was no weapons, as you mentioned. And then another thing too that you want to point out here is the fact that he followed their orders. I mean, yes, he's trying to defend himself. He's upset. You're messing with me. But this officer even admits later on in the video that he had no clue that Ahmaud was already searched for weapons.
You got to look at this video, and you got to say, the cops are saying, oh, this is an area known for drug activity. Well, that doesn't mean everybody who goes to that park is involved in drug activity, and he said he even worked right around there.
But when you're a young black male, that's exactly what happens. And that right there is the issue. And I don't know if this can be used in the case that, you know, Ahmaud's family has happening right here, right now. But this is a very bad example of how the police department down there, they learn that just because you're black, it doesn't instantly make you a drug dealer, a criminal, or someone who you should fear.
The level of fear is well placed. When you look at this guy getting tased, when his hands are up, when they're putting him on the ground after they've searched him.
I mean, this is not new before, you know, hands up, don't shoot. That's the bottom message of that whole movement. Like, yeah, hands up or not, you're still presented as a threat just because of your skin color.
Lauren, you touched on something, which is the reason we posted this video, and the reason we want to talk about it now is, what is its relevance to the case right now? Could there be relevance to the case right now?
I think that this could definitely show how the police department down there is not prepared when it comes to dealing with people of color. And just when it comes to dealing with tense situations in general. You could sense that there was an intense moment here, and they instantly responded by grabbing a taser.
Lauren, I agree with you that video does show perhaps how the police deal with people of color down there. But Travis McMichael is not, or never was, a police officer. Now, Gregory McMichael was. Now,
well,
that's
Charles,
where
can I jump in, Charles? Because the rub on this is, as far as I'm concerned, this police department deputized McMichael by telling that homeowner, hey, he came to us and said, hey, I'll help you out here, so you call him when your doorbell goes off. So I think what they've done is they have kind of bootstrapped him into the same position they're in. And that's why I think this video is relevant, because the video is showing the way they treat African-American men in that city. And they were comfortable letting McMichael do what they did back then.